Hi, Sarah.
Hi.
How are you doing today?
I'm good. I'm definitely glad to be back after this week.
Good.
Yeah.
Well, we'll definitely dive into everything.
Okay.
And I'm glad to see you as always. So I know last time you were here, we had a lot to talk about.
Mhm.
I know you had a big week this week, so
Yeah.
I'm sure that we have a lot to dive into as well.
Yeah.
But I know what we really focused on last time you were here was your mom. Kind of looking ahead to the meeting that I'm assuming you guys had this week.
Yeah, we can.
And then also diving into kind of some of the details about your childhood, the onset of her schizophrenia, and then how that kind of progressed through middle school and high school for you.
Yeah.
So then I was thinking this week, I would love to first hear how this past week went, and then we can kind of take it from there.
Okay, great. So I was looking forward to coming in because it did feel like a long beginning of the week following our trip to Wisconsin to see our mom. And I feel like following the trip, I have been feeling significantly anxious. I know I feel like I'm coming in every week saying that, but this feels, I don't know, stronger, or like the symptoms feel a little more intense than typical following this trip. But so to tell you, is it okay if I start telling you about the trip?
Please.
Okay. So my sister and I left on Friday to drive up to Wisconsin, and our plan was to stay Friday and leave Saturday night, and stay in a hotel Friday night. And so we were both nervous going up, and the drive kind of just sucked because both of us didn't necessarily want to be doing this, but we wanted to, but it's just such a uncomfortable situation that it wasn't something that felt, good going into. So we drove up there Friday and got to her apartment, which we had never seen, and it was tiny, and we had looked it up on like Google Maps ahead of time, or Google World, where you can see the actual apartments, and we could tell it was already like not a nice place. And so, she can't afford it, or can't afford nicer housing, so it makes sense, but it doesn't mean it was easy to like see how little she's living with.
That can be hard.
Yeah, and so we got there, and seeing her, like the first moment was, we were all crying, and it was nice to see her, and we were hugging. There was a little bit of awkward tension just because like it had been so long, and you could tell she was really nervous. And so then we went inside her apartment. We saw her apartment, and that night we went to like a nicer dinner, and you could tell my mom just feels really uncomfortable in her own, skin. She gained a lot of weight while she was sick. So, when I was young, she was always very thin and petite, and she gained weight while she was sick, and she's about to be starting chemo soon. So I'm sure, I don't know how that's going to look either, but you can tell she is really self-conscious and everything. And getting ready for dinner, she couldn't decide what to wear, and could tell, like, she didn't want to we did take a picture, but she didn't want to take a picture because she didn't think she looked good. So that was interesting. And
sorry, can I?
Yeah.
Have you seen her since that incident in high school at the mall?
No, she'd sent texts or called me or whatever, but we had never seen each other since then.
Okay. And so you said you guys were nervous. You said everyone was nervous.
Yeah.
Which makes sense.
I think my mom most of all. But yeah.
Which, like you said, if she's not feeling comfortable in her skin, that probably added to it too.
Yeah. And my sister was a little tense, so I felt like I was had to navigate the situation for us.
That's interesting. Did you feel I know that there was tension between the two of them. as you were growing up because of your sister's resentment?
Yeah.
Did you feel kind of like the middleman mediator at that point?
Growing up, when I was younger?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was definitely, I was young, so it was hard, but I was definitely trying. I was a happy kid, and my sister was in her, teens, preteens when this was happening, so she was definitely having a harder time with it and was very moody. I remember that. So I did feel like I was someone my mom could count on a little more.
Sure.
And, my sister didn't necessarily look to me for support because I was young. I'm significantly younger, but I did feel like I was kind of a little bit of a middleman between them or a buffer, at least for my mom. So yeah, that's actually interesting to think about, but it was kind of the same way this past weekend too.
I could see that. I'm sorry, I interrupted.
No.
So go ahead, you went to dinner.
Yeah, so we went to dinner. It was good. The conversations were really good. It was nice catching up with my mom and telling her about my boyfriend, and I mean, she missed my sister's wedding, and my sister's married now, so we got to show her pictures of everyone. She really liked seeing my boyfriend and my sister's husband, and kind of people in the family who she knew, and she liked seeing pictures of, and we showed her a lot of pictures of us throughout the years that she missed, so it was nice to kind of reminisce and talk about those things. So that Friday night was really, really nice. We ended up dropping her back off after dinner and then going to the hotel. And then the next morning, we kind of had a full day planned. And please stop me if you have any questions. I'm just going to keep going until then. So we woke up pretty early and went to her apartment. She wanted to get her hair done, like cut and highlighted. So we took her to a hair salon, and obviously she had nothing scheduled like herself. So we made an appointment to do this and got her taken. We took her in, and she couldn't decide really how she wanted her hair, and but she ended up liking how everything turned out in the end, and it was fun. And then after that, she needed new glasses, so we went to a glasses store in the mall, and while my sister was helping her pick out glasses, I was trying to set up a phone for her.
Oh, nice.
Which, I mean, it just colored the scenario a little bit because it took me like 2 hours to get the whole thing set up via phone, and I was exhausted by the end of it. And while my mom kept trying on glasses, she was getting really upset and started to cry because she couldn't decide which one. She didn't like how any of them looked. So you could tell she's really sensitive in that aspect. So my sister was getting really frustrated, and at that point I'm like, this is so ridiculous. She's like not capable of doing anything, she can't pick these glasses, she can't decide on anything. I'm setting up her phone for 2 hours.
What would happen if you guys weren't there?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so like it just got frustrating. Like I felt this resentment starting to build up a little bit, where I was like, why am I doing so much to take care of you? She's only 65 years old, I think, maybe 64. And like it just started to hit me because I was getting frustrated with the phone company. I was getting frustrated with her. You could tell she was exhausted. I was exhausted. My sister was exhausted. So we ended up going back to her place, and we had her new phone, and she couldn't figure out how to do anything on it, like text or anything. So she was asking for help, and at this point, I'm trying to explain things to her, and she's just not understanding or retaining anything. And I'm so exhausted, and we're leaving this. At this point, it's like 3, and we're leaving in an hour or so. And so I help her out as best I can for a little bit, and finally we just end up going, and we leave on fine terms, but it was just kind of an interesting goodbye because it wasn't like the night before where everything was like nice and we were reminiscing and talking about everything she's missed. It was more of like it got tense, and everyone in was exhausted. So like we're leaving and my mom starts crying. She's like, when will I see you guys again? And for me, especially after this experience, I didn't want to commit to, you know, immediately coming back to Wisconsin. Like it was a lot to process. And so, yeah, so we were like, we don't know. We'll like be in touch. We'll text you when we're home, whatever. But this whole week have just felt this kind of overwhelming anxiety around, you know, that experience this past weekend. Just kind of like feeling frustrated and not necessarily ready to dive back into a full-fledged relationship immediately. I felt like I came home feeling the need to pull back a little bit. So, yeah, it was a lot.
And first of all, that's okay. It's a big that you haven't seen her in years, literally years. So it's okay to feel that way and to want to pull back a little bit. But so let me just kind of summarize what I heard. So Friday night was great. It was kind of reminiscent for the three of you. It sounded like no conflict whatsoever, and almost, correct me if I'm wrong, kind of felt like the old mom. Yeah, that you had when you were younger.
In a sense, it was definitely easier. Like I didn't feel like I was taking care of her. So yeah, it did kind of feel a little bit like old times. So.
And that was good. And then Saturday, things kind of switched a little bit because there were some challenges. You were trying to set up her phone and get her glasses, and everyone was frustrated for kind of different reasons.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Well, that's great that you wanted to help her out so much, and I'm sure that she very much appreciated that. But
definitely.
I can't imagine how difficult that would have been for you and your sister.
Yeah. It was.
And I'm curious, and then when you said goodbye, your mom was upset. You guys kind of felt a little bit of tension. I'm curious how it felt for you when your mom started crying when you left.
Honestly, and I don't want this to sound bad or anything, but it just felt like a little kid. Like I was having to take care of like this little kid, and like seeing her cry, not knowing how to work her phone, and like her just not retaining all these things we're telling her. It just felt like I don't know. It felt like I was the adult and she was the kid in this situation, and like having to say goodbye to a kid at summer camp or something, you know, like it just, I felt more resentment this trip than I think I expected to feel. Okay. So,
so resentment. Yeah. What you would say.
Yeah. And then afterwards, like overwhelming anxiety, but yes. Yeah.
And I know that's something we had talked about mostly with your sister. We knew that you kind of had some resentment.
Yeah.
But, it's interesting to me, and, you know, on one hand, last time we went very deep into, you know, you understand that schizophrenia is not your mom's fault. You don't want to make that who she is. But on the other hand, I'm kind of hearing this resentment and kind of feeling like you have to take care of her. What do you make of that?
Yeah, that's a really good point. I think for me, it was easier to remember, you know, the symptoms of schizophrenia and remember the schizophrenia being a biological condition or whatever when I was not with her, like when I was remembering her. I see. And then when kind of being with her in person, it's hard to, I guess, take myself back out and take a step back and realize like she does still have schizophrenia, even though she's on medication, and there are parts of her, the old her that I see, there's just still so many challenges, you know, that she has on a day-to-day basis that I guess in the grand scheme of things, when I'm there with her, it's harder for me to remember that. But yeah, that's interesting. I guess I hadn't really thought of it like that, but it definitely made it more difficult, you know, spending 2 full days with her and realizing kind of just the situation as a whole, as well as the parts of it that were just her missing so much of our life and having to catch up with my mom about so much stuff. So
maybe that was a reminder for you how much time had passed.
Yeah, I guess that's definitely probably what it was. Just kind of going through pictures and realizing the significant events that we had so many to go through. So yeah.
And I know, kind of going into the meeting, and kind of since we started seeing each other, you were kind of somewhat looking forward to reconnecting with your mom.
Yeah.
I'm curious where you're at now after this visit.
Well, kind of bringing up what you said about like me being able to talk about her diagnosis and being understanding, and kind of now being having more resentment. It kind of helps me understand, I think, kind of where my emotions are going with this whole thing. I feel like right now my anxiety is really bad, so there's no part of me that wants to run back in and go see her again. Like I said, I felt the need to pull back on our relationship a little bit. So I don't know. It's hard. I think it's probably hard for me to admit too that I was excited to do this, and that it wasn't just this mom who, you know, I had when I was a kid. It's still, my mom is still sick, and it's still something I have to deal with. Just because she came back into my life doesn't mean, you know, she doesn't have schizophrenia and she's not sick. So,
and like I said, it's okay to kind of take a step back.
Yeah.
Not do too much at once.
Yeah.
So you've said a couple of times that your anxiety is significantly worse after this past weekend. So, how do you know, or how can you tell what's changed?
So, I mean, the typical symptoms just get increased. You know, the difficulty sleeping, the, you know, pain in my chest and whatnot, difficulty concentrating at work, and then just the increased need to like be in contact with my boyfriend and with my friends too, to some extent, but just, I don't know why I felt like I needed to spend like every night this week with my boyfriend. Just because I don't know, and I have an awareness of like I don't want to be clingy, and I don't want him to feel like I'm suffocating him or whatnot. But I just felt the need for him to be around, he gets that, and I'm able to tell him that. But at the same time, I know like he has to work, and his work doesn't just stay in the office. Like he has to do work at home a lot, and so I need to like respect his space. It's just like a constant conflict in my head where I'm like, okay, you're fine. You don't need your boyfriend. Like this, we're fine. Like we can handle this. Like I'm being dramatic or whatever. And I try to reach out to them, my friends instead. But I definitely just noticed this like clinginess that I had after going to see my mom. So
that's so interesting, and I've heard you say clingy before.
Yeah.
So has your boyfriend ever said anything about being clingy, or is that a word that you've used?
He hasn't used the word clingy. He hasn't even really said anything in particular around me being clingy or needy. He'll respectfully tell me like he has to work or he can't do this, or he'll ask me if everything's okay, but he hasn't specifically used the word clingy. No.
Have you had any past relationships where you felt clingy or been told you were clingy?
I'm trying to think. I mean, I have a couple really good friends that I guess I cling to or whatever, like when I'm feeling anxious or things are hard. I'm trying to think of a specific past relationship where but no, like until I had anxiety, I was pretty carefree. And like, you know, obviously the past year I felt the need to become closer to a few of my friends. And obviously I got a boyfriend in that time where we got close really quickly. And yeah, he's been a supportive relationship, but it is a lot of contact and closeness. Yeah. With my mom, I mean, growing up, you know, I wasn't able to necessarily be clingy to her, and my dad is so much older. So neither of my parents really, and I was the youngest, so by a lot. So I didn't have any really, really close siblings to my age. So
yeah. And the reason I ask is just because I wonder if if your boyfriend was going through a hard time and he needed to be around you more often. And correct me if I'm wrong, I don't think that you would think of him as clingy.
Yeah, I mean, no, I definitely wouldn't. I would appreciate him telling me whatever was going on and wanting to be around me or wanting my support. I don't know why, for me, it just feels like I'm constantly nagging or being needy, or not necessarily nagging, but like just needing to be around him. And I don't know why that runs through my head where I'm like, okay, just give him a break. Like, he has to have like a life outside of just me. So I don't know why that comes to mind, or why I feel the need to be around him all the time.
I think it speaks to your self-awareness and not
Yeah.
wanting to be clingy, but
Yeah.
I also don't want you to,
Yeah.
underestimate how good of a resource he is.
Right.
Knowing that if it makes you feel better to be around him,
is,
then during this time, I think that's something you should take advantage of, and I don't think it's a bad thing.
Okay, I don't think he does either, but yeah, it's something that kind of runs through my head. I just need to remember to stop that. Okay.
Those automatic kind of negative thoughts can get to you sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
So I'm also curious to kind of understand, I know when you left, your anxiety level was pretty high.
Yeah.
But after dinner on Friday, where was your anxiety at?
I don't feel like my anxiety ever fully, kind of left in while I was with my mom. It was definitely at its lowest when we were at dinner, because I was enjoying myself. I work in the restaurant industry, so that's a place I'm typically comfortable at, restaurants. And I just felt like everyone was a little bit more at ease. But there is some sort of underlying anxiety that, like, it didn't go away the whole weekend.
Yeah.
Like, as small as just, like, lags in conversation aren't, it's like being with a stranger, kind of, so who you're supposed to know. I don't know. It was an odd situation. I think comparatively to being here, and previously, like, before I'd gone, my anxiety was pretty typical for how I am normally when we're at dinner, and then it was significantly higher the rest of the weekend. So dinner was nice. It's just the next day we should have done it the opposite way. Done all the hard stuff first, and then
had a nice note to leave on.
Yeah.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
And remind me again, you may have mentioned this already, but when did you begin reconnecting with your mom?
So it was my uncle, who, my mom's brother, reached out to me. I'm trying to think, just about a year ago, maybe. No, sorry. I had heard from my mom a couple times via text messages. Like, she would send text messages that didn't really make a lot of sense. And sorry, that was 2 years ago. And then my uncle, the last 3 months ago, reached out to me and my sister and said, I think you should get in touch with your mom. He didn't give a reason why. I finally got in touch with a friend of hers. I didn't even get in touch with her right away. And her friend was the one who said, your mom's on court mandated to be on medication, and she's doing well, but she does have cancer. And that's when then I finally worked up the courage to talk to my mom. So sorry, it was 3 months ago that my uncle reached out to me about her. I probably started talking to her 2.5 months ago. Like, it took a couple weeks to, like, get everything figured out. And then the last time I talked to her before that was like 2 years before that.
Okay. And the timeline that you just explained to me, do you see any connection between those events and your anxiety, and kind of how it's maybe increased, decreased over that time?
Well, yeah, I remember telling you when I first came in, like, it had been 3 weeks, before I started therapy, that my symptoms had gotten really, or 3 months, my symptoms had gotten really bad. And I mean, yeah, now that you say it, there's definitely a correlation between when my symptoms got really bad and when my mom started coming back into my life. It was shortly after my uncle had reached out to me, before I even necessarily started talking to her, but when I'd known that, he wanted me to reach out, and then I talked to her friend, and she had shared that my mom was on medication and doing well, but that she had cancer. It was like a bunch of things hitting me at one time.
Yeah.
So there's definitely similarities between when I started feeling symptoms and when my mom was coming back around, which I don't think I realized until now, but that makes a lot of sense.
And that's interesting. And it's sometimes hard to point that out because, I know you said your anxiety is the worst at work, so it can seem like that's what's kind of bringing that on, but it's not always that.
Right.
So I am glad that we've been kind of focusing on your mom then.
Yeah.
And as we go into the coming weeks, I'll be curious to, I know you're planning on kind of taking a step back now, which, like I said, I think that's totally okay.
Okay.
But as, in the coming weeks, it will be interesting to kind of continue to dive into that and figure out together where you might want to go.
Yeah, I even just talking today, I feel like there is something to be said about like seeing my mom and thinking about her leaving however many years ago, like my desire to go, I wanted to go there and like just rekindle all that, and that wasn't possible, which realistically I knew, but it was definitely kind of showed me like how desperately I've been looking for those feelings, of compassion and somebody to take care of me.
And that can be then disappointing when your expectations and reality don't always align, which they often don't. Well then, we are kind of getting close to the end of session, but like I said, I would love to keep talking about that next week and talk about what you were looking for this weekend and kind of where we'll go from here.
Okay.
Is there anything else that you wanted to cover today?
I mean, I knew coming into this session I really wanted to talk about this weekend and kind of the feelings I had around this weekend. But yeah, definitely I wouldn't mind exploring more next week on the feelings kind of going into this weekend and after. I know we kind of touched on it and I brought it up a little bit at the end, but I do think there's, like, I'm starting to understand some tendencies I have that might be related to my mom leaving, for sure.
Awesome. Well, then we can definitely do that.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.